Hey everybody, Jeff Miller here, head of GRE instruction at Target Test Prep. Today I want to talk about 7 tips that you can follow, or 7 strategies that you can follow to fight test anxiety on the GRE. There's a ton of information packed in this video, so if you are struggling from test anxiety, there's a lot you can learn and hopefully get rid of the test anxiety and improve your GRE score. Before getting into our strategies of how to deal with GRE test anxiety, let's talk about what anxiety looks like when you're on the GRE, right? Well, there's many symptoms related to test anxiety that I think you'll be able to recognize if in fact you're suffering from it. Things such as your mind is going blank as you look at questions. It's hard to follow questions. Let's say you're in a long reading comprehension passage and all of a sudden you are having trouble following it or concentrating while reading it. That's a sign of test anxiety. If after you get through a test, you think about questions and you say, man, I know I got that question wrong, but now it's making complete sense to me. Again, that could be test anxiety. Being unfocused, having racing thoughts that you can't get a handle on, that could be test anxiety. Not being able to concentrate in any problem could be test anxiety. Also, worrying about how you're performing at any given moment could also be signs of test anxiety. This is a number of things, but in the general macro idea of when you're suffering from test anxiety is when you're not performing up to your ability levels, given the fact that you think you have a high ability level, and that's based on how long you've been studying for, how you've been doing on your practice exams. In other words, it's going to be really clear. I mean, look, if you were crushing your practice exams, knocking them out of the park, and all of a sudden you get to the GRE on test day, and it seems like you're doing this for the first time, that's testing anxiety. So look out for those cues, and then that way you'll know when this is affecting you. And now we're going to get into some strategies you can learn and lean on to help battle that test day anxiety. Strategy number 1, be prepared. This may seem obvious, but it's so important. Just imagine how things are on test day. You get to the test, you sit down, unless you're doing it at home, but still, you get to the test and sit down, maybe in your home office, and something goes wrong on the test. Well, what are the reactions that you can have? You can either freak out and realize, oh my gosh, I can't do this, or you can say, you know what, I am ridiculously prepared and I'm going to be just fine. And also think about how great it is to be super prepared. I talk to my students about this a lot. When you're prepared, you start to see the test, you start to see the answers before they even come to you. If you get a quant question, and let's say it's based off of estimating exponents, well, that can be a tricky concept for somebody. But if you're prepared and you understand the tricks to how to deal with estimating exponent questions and you know what they're looking for, what's going to happen? You're going to look at that question, you're going to immediately know how to solve it, and that is going to make you uber confident and cool and calm and collected for the rest of the exam. So not only is being prepared help stave off any sort of anxiety that may come your way initially on the test, but it's also going to stave off anxiety from coming your way when maybe something goes wrong on the test, because you're going to be able to lean on the fact that, hey, I'm prepared, I've got this. Even if one small thing goes wrong, I know the rest of the test will be fine, and that's why preparation is so critical for making sure you don't fall into the trap of GRE test anxiety. Tip number 2, take all 5 ETS practice exams. Now, if you're following the Target Test Prep study plan, which some of you probably are who are watching this video, we have the practice test at the end of your study plan after the learning phase. Now, this is important because these practice tests are going to show you exactly where you're at in relation to your target score, and that's going to help build your confidence, which we just talked about. And 2, it's going to get you prepared for the rigors of test day, right? Imagine going in and taking your GRE for the first time without having taken any practice exams, without understanding the mental tax that it has on you, without even getting used to the screens that the GRE test has, or getting used to the on-screen calculator. All of these things are super important because you want everything to be as normalized as it can on test day, and if it can, it's just going to be another day. if you're taking your practice test, let's say every Saturday until your real GRE, at the same time, you just are going to follow the same routine. Let's say your GRE is at 11 a.m. Well, what do you do when you take your practice test if it's 11 a.m. on a Saturday? You get up, you eat your breakfast, maybe you exercise a little bit, do a couple warm-up questions, then sit down and you take it. What do you do on test day? Same deal. Get up, eat your breakfast, maybe go for a walk, get a little exercise, do some practice questions, and then go to the test center and take the darn thing. And if the test can feel like it's any other day, then you're not going to be anxious or nervous when you get to the test center and take it, or if you take it at home online. Either way, it's just going to be a regular thing for you, and it won't be a big deal or anything to worry about. Strategy number 3, and this shouldn't be underestimated, it is visualize your success. Now, anyone who is successful on any level, professional athlete, professional musician, anyone, even a public speaker, they're always understanding that it's what you do leading up to the event or to test day that really helps you get in a position to be successful. But this is something you have to work at and you have to constantly do. You need to be able to see the success that you're going to have on the test. You need to train your brain to understand that, you know what, I am going to be successful on test day. You need to have positive thoughts leading up to test day where you see yourself doing the things you need to do to be successful. But remember, this doesn't just happen. So if you're not someone who spends time doing any sort of visualization, this is something you're going to have to sit down and really force yourself to do. Heck, even set your alarm 3 times a day on your phone, where during that time you spend 10 to 15 minutes visualizing how you're going to be successful on the GMAT. And these visualization techniques can be a lot of things. Maybe you're going to visualize the things that you studied that day to ensure that you actually develop deep mastery of those concepts. Perhaps you're going to visualize sitting in your seat during the GRE, just having positive thoughts and answering correct questions. Perhaps you are going to visualize being accurate during your test, or you're going to visualize waking up the morning of your test and being very excited for test day. Or heck, even visualize finishing the test, seeing that awesome score on the screen, understanding that the time you put in and the effort you put in pays off. These are things, as I said, very successful people do. Very successful athletes, musicians, even public speakers, anything to make sure that they understand what it's going to feel like to be successful on test day. And the more positive thoughts you can pump into your brain, the more happy you're going to be throughout the process of studying for your GRE, but then of course on test day. And by doing it, it's going to push out any anxiety that you may have, any nerves that you may have, because you know you've been preparing for this successful day for a while, and it's going to show when you actually take the exam. Strategy number 4, exposure therapy. Now this happens with many things, not just your GRE. I mean, let's say you're afraid of heights. Well, what can you do for exposure therapy? You can put yourself in a high altitude or high position to see how you manage your response to those heights, right? So how does this relate to GRE exactly? Well, there's a lot of nerve triggering things that can happen during a GRE. Maybe you're nervous that you're not going to get to the test center on time, or you don't necessarily know the route to your test center. Or let's say that you going to make a careless error, and then it's how you respond to that careless error. Or let's say you're worried that you're going to run out of time and how you're going to deal with that. There's a million things. Or let's say you're going to need extra scrap paper and you want to make sure that your proctor actually sees you when you ask for it. These are all nerve-inducing things, anxiety-inducing things, right? So how does exposure therapy help? Well, start visualizing these things from happening or when they would happen, and then what your reaction is going to be. If the proctor doesn't see you right away in your test and you're raising your hand for more scrap paper, are you going to panic? Are you going to think, oh my gosh, the test is over? Or are you going to keep your hand raised and keep pushing forward in your test until he or she sees you and provides you with more scrap paper? If you make a careless error and don't see the correct response amongst the answer choices in a math question, for example, are you going to panic? Or are you going to say, you know what? I'm going to take a guess, I'm going to mark it for review, and I'm going to move on. The point is, the more you can think about these scenarios happening, the better off you're going to be on test day. If you're nervous that getting to the test center on time, what can you do? Drive to the test center. Take public transportation to the test center. Do a dry run. You want to make sure you have a positive response for any of these anxiety-inducing events that can happen. And the more you're prepared for those events from happening, or how you respond to them in a positive light, the better off you'll be if and when they happen. Abandon the need for perfection. This is so important because, look, what does our brain always tell us when we do anything? We want to be perfect, right? But on the GRE, you don't have to be perfect for a great score. But you got to train this way, and you got to do this in your practice tests as well, where when there's a question that you think you should get right, but you're just not getting it, and this happens to almost everybody, you can't spend 10 minutes trying to get it right because you're so worried about being perfect that you mess up the rest of the section, and then of course the following sections if you don't do well on it because of how the scoring algorithm works, right? So the best thing to do is to give up on a question even if you know you should have it, and then come back to it if and when you have the time. This is for quant, this is for verbal. If there's a question on text completion and you see a vocabulary word that you know you should know, but it's just not coming to you, don't stay there for hours. Take a guess, move on, live to fight another day. You've got 20 quant questions, 20 verbal questions in every section, and even if you're not perfect, you can do well enough to move on to the next hard section. And that's got to be the mantra that you take in your practice exams, and allow that to spill over for test day so that you're not in this mindset where I'm not going to move on till I get a question correct, because that will damage the macro test, meaning it will screw up a section, it will screw up following sections, and there's a good chance by doing that you won't get your score. Strategy number 6, don't compare yourself to others. Now, Theodore Roosevelt once famously said that comparison is the thief of joy. So let's think about that. And I think this is true for many aspects of our lives, and not just our GRE studying or taking the GRE, right? Look, there's going to be people around you who probably perform better in the GRE than you do, but it doesn't mean that they're better at doing the GRE. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to go to better graduate schools than you. It just means that's their personal goal. So you can't look at your coworkers or your friends or even family members and say, well, if I don't match their GRE success, there's something wrong with me. No. Don't think like that. You have personal goals, just you. And if your goal is a 320 and that gets you into your graduate school of choice, and someone else has a goal of 330 and that gets them into their school of choice, then great. Then everybody's successful in their own right. But you can't look at what someone else is doing and then say you're better off or worse off because of it. The other thing about this too is people spend different amounts of time to master the GRE, right? So again, if a colleague does it in 2 weeks and you're 2 months into your prep, you can't look at that colleague and say, well, what am I doing wrong? Why am I less than in the GRE than my colleague is? That's going to absolutely demoralize your GRE studying, and you just don't need that. So you have to look at yourself and say, am I doing everything I need to do every day? Am I putting in the time? Am I improving at my pace? And if the answer is yes, then you're good. Because when you start comparing yourself to other people, that's where the anxiety creeps in. Not only during your GRE prep, but that anxiety is going to move over to test day as well, and you're going to be taking your test, and all that anxiety, all of those jumbled up nerves are going to kick in because you're going to be doubting yourself. So if you're doing it, stop comparing yourself to others, understand that you're on your own personal journey, and if you can do that, you'll have less anxiety, and it's going to make you that much better on test day. Finally, tip number 7, have a plan B and have a plan C. So what does that mean exactly? Well, what a lot of people do who go into the test super nervous and like a ball of nerves is they take their one and final shot at their GRE right before their application deadline. And perhaps they didn't even give themselves enough time to study leading up to it. So what's the best thing you can do? schedule your GRE appropriately and understand that this is a month-long or many month-long process as opposed to many weeks, right? So if you think you're going to need 2 months, well, give yourself 4, 5, or even 6 months. Now, why am I saying that? Because when you go into your GRE, you want to go in, of course, well prepared, but with the understanding that, hey, something doesn't go my way today, I've got another shot at this or another 2 or 3 shots at this because I've given myself the right amount of time to restudy and retake if necessary. That is so huge. I can't tell you that if the burden is off your shoulder of having to be done by the next day because you need to submit your application deadlines, you're just going to feel cooler. You're going to have less of a load on your back because you're going to know that you have a backup plan and that eventually, before the application deadlines, you'll be set with your GRE. And again, that's going to lessen the anxiety and make you more successful on test day. So that concludes today's video. I had a great time chatting about some strategies you can follow to get rid of your testing anxiety. And like I said earlier in the video, if you are struggling from test anxiety, I really think if you can follow these tips, you will get rid of that anxiety once and for all. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel. And if there's more you want to learn or hear from me, leave comments, let me know what it is you'd like me to discuss in these videos, and I will get to them in time. So thanks for watching, and I'll see everybody soon.